you're backstage. You're in the show. Hello?
All right, hold on one second, folks. We are live. And hello, Dr. Keith.
How are you doing, Regina?
I am good. Hello, everybody, and Regina Allen here, and welcome to Coffee with Regina. I have Dr. Keith McNally with me this morning, and I'm so excited to have you here. Let
All
me
right.
bring up your short bio.
Okay.
Um, and I know there's way more we're going to talk about outside of this. So this is just scratching the surface of Dr. Keith. You want to call it Dr. Keith, Dr. McNally? What do you prefer?
My students call me Doc or Professor, but you could just call me Keith is fine.
All right. Well, Keith it is. So Dr. Keith, we'll start that way because that's the way your name is on the screen here. He specializes in facilitating discussions by bringing like-minded people together to create real impact. Dr. McNally launched 3 podcasts, not one, but 3 podcasts, overachiever, in the past 2 years. The Question Guy podcast, the Coach's Corner, and the Envision Speakers Series. And the Question Guy podcast addresses people's personal stories. Coach's Corner is a one-on-one conversation regarding his guest professional expertise, and the Envision Speaker Series brings a group of subject matter experts together at the table to propose solutions to problems currently impacting our world. He's also the author of Walking the Path, A Leader's Journey. It's a leadership book focusing on personal development. And we'll go into the other stuff in just a minute. So, oh my goodness, welcome, Keith.
Regina, that seemed like a lot.
It was a lot. And you are just amazing. So I know you have done a ton of stuff. And for today's purpose, we have a roughly 30, 40 minutes to chat and have our coffee together. And so tell me, 3 podcasts. What in the world ever what were you thinking? Why 3?
Um, the story behind this is I have to blame everything on COVID. So let's blame everything on COVID and work from there. Meaning everybody's world changed when COVID hit everything, and then the quarantine shut us all down. And so, for me, it was a need to reach out to people on my LinkedIn connection list and find out what everybody was doing and how they were surviving this impact. And so what I was finding was that people were using this new situation that we were all in to make significant changes, pivots, shifts, whatever you want to call it, in their life. And I wanted to put it on record. I wanted to share those personal transformation stories with the world. And people, slowly but surely, allowed me to share their stories in podcast platforms, right? And typically, the question guide really only sits on my YouTube channel. Um, it's when I, evolved into the Envision Speaker Series that's more of a podcast format. But from the Question Guy podcast, people were taking that personal transformation and creating business models from it. And so they were becoming coaches, speakers, uh, authors, book authors, and they use that personal power to help other people get unstuck in whatever situations that they were in. And so I began bringing people back on and let's talk about how you help others. And so that's where Coach's Corner came to be. And then over the evolution, and this is really about a 2-year evolution, the people that I was having on Coach's Corner, they were seeing the broader scope, the broader scale of how they could help, but really in terms of how is how are those problems really impacting society, whether it's local to their community, to their state, to the globe. And so I really wanted to create a space where we wanted, I wanted, but they also wanted to change, make social impact, change the way people are thinking about their lives in a broader scale. And so began bringing people, and you were on one of those shows. You and your colleague, your friend, Steve Gamlin, were on. You both were on the Envision Speakers Series. And so because you wanted to share what you've learned in a new space, and so I appreciate that.
I love the way it all kind of evolved into the three podcasts because when people think about creating a podcast, most people are a little freaked out. It's the unknown. They haven't done it yet. And they're like, what do I do? How do I do this? How do I even find guests for my show and that kind of thing? So you not only have one, but now you have three that you find guests for and you do things with. So it's amazing how it's evolved and how popular, your information is. So, congratulations on that because that's an amazing achievement. I absolutely love that. Now you said something about how it started. And I have a question for you because you said it started with you went back to LinkedIn. Now I hear you're kind of a LinkedIn expert at this point too.
I don't know about that, but I make best use of it as I can.
So, there's a lot of people who use LinkedIn and aren't exactly sure about how did you do that? People who use LinkedIn, sometimes it's just they look at the feed, they look at the posts, they don't really use it to create things, to bring business in. They're kind of out there kind of perusing, and every now and then they like something and they post something. And when you said that, the first one came about because you went out on LinkedIn and was like, okay, well, where is everybody? What's everybody doing? What does everybody need right now? We're in the middle of COVID. And so we've got this thing going on. Nobody's going out. So everybody's online. What are we doing here? How did you work that? How did you work the LinkedIn platform to your advantage like that?
I guess very innately. I just started to ask people who I didn't even know. And so let's kind of put this into perspective. My LinkedIn connection list was maybe 2,000 people strong. This was a couple of years back, COVID. So 2020, 2021. And of those 2,000 people, I may have actually known maybe 10 of them, right? Some of them were my students, my collegiate students, but some of them were, colleagues. But for me, it was, I'm a small fish in a big pond. I'm a small fish in this, LinkedIn pond. And I was very much an introvert, very, very much an introvert. And so if I'm going through some stuff personally and professionally, other people are probably going through some similar stuff, if not worse than I am. And so there was a time when I was unemployed for quite a number of months. And that had a significant impact on my life personally and professionally. But what I started to do was just, reach out, a direct message to people I were already connected to and say, hey, do you want to jump on a Zoom call? Not everybody said yes, but for those that were saying yes, it's because they had an internal need to share their story with somebody because they quite literally were going through some stuff. And so I always say it's like two sides of a coin, that on the one side of the coin, people had lost friends, by, COVID, people had died, lost
Yeah.
friends, family members, lost jobs, lost money, lost income, lost their house. All that situation really bad. On the flip side of that coin, people saw this as an opportunity because when they woke up every morning in quarantine and they looked at themselves in the mirror, they didn't like what they saw. they didn't like the fact that their life was not in alignment with what they thought their values were. And so they did a lot of restructuring personally. So either side of that coin fostered a conversation. And it was those conversations, it was those people who were saying yes to me, one, to have a conversation, and two, to record it. And so, that wasn't even a strategy. It was kind of like, where's what was my need of, reaching out and connecting, and then people were having that same need, and so they were connecting back.
You say that, and isn't it just amazing how you kind of like fall into it? It's when when you really need something in your own life and you're open to receiving, things tend to show up. The other people who now you can help and chat with and provide some support with. All of a sudden, everybody starts showing up because you were open to receiving. I
Yeah.
mean, other people at that period were bound and determined to play the victim and just stay in the I'm in quarantine and oh my gosh, my life is just terrible, and this, so I'm just going to eat and I'm going to gain 40 pounds and I'm going to do the, and then they wake up and they're like, I hate myself, and they're going through all this stuff because of what they created, instead of choosing to say, you know what, I'm going to look at this a different way. I'm going to respond to it in a different way. I'm a Canfield Certified Success Principles trainer, and the very first principle talks about this equation called E plus R equals O, and I talk about it often. It's the event plus your response equals the outcome. So you get to choose your response. We didn't choose to have COVID, hit the world and have this dramatic effect.
Mhm.
And for a lot of people, the outcome wasn't all that great. I mean, businesses closed, people passed. I mean, there was a lot of not so good stuff because of that. However, for the people who were dealing with it, those who chose a response to say, hey, let me reach out, let me DM a few people and say, hey, you want to have a Zoom coffee and just chat? I get it. I'm there. And let's just chat and bring you to maybe a little bit more positive place. People like you are a godsend.
Well, I think I was one of the ones who used the opportunity, and given my own situation and my own circumstances, really out of need. But it was really out of a need to learn more about other people. Like I said, I was an introvert. I'm an introvert by nature, and so that about me had to change. And so that was one of the things that I knew, that if COVID was to push me forward in a different direction, that was one of the directions I had to take. I had to find out how to be more social, how to be more interactive, more engaging. And, here I am. If you want to look at the statistics, the question guy is now starting season 5. So in all my seasons, I've got 40 episodes. So 4 times 4 is 16. That's 160. I've recorded 170 conversations. Coach's Corner is on season 2, midway through season 2. So I've had about 70 conversations. And the Envision Speakers Series, I think I do one every other week. And so I have about 23, 24 recorded conversations, but I actually have 2 more conversations. So it's not just 3, it's actually 5. And it's
Wow.
becoming 6 soon.
Well, talk about overachiever. Wow, that is incredible, and I know how powerful, because again, like you said, I was on one of your podcasts, and got to tell my story about where I came from. Now, we talk about, from a business standpoint, especially if you're a coach or a consultant and you're creating your content and you're looking for new clients, we always talk about being authentic. And, I talk to people often about sharing their story, because we all have a story. And some of those stories are not the best stories. However, those stories sometimes actually, if your response to your story is not to be the victim, but to use it in a positive way, is sharing that story can actually help someone else. It could save the life of somebody else, literally. And I know you have an amazing story. Are you open to sharing some of your story?
Um, Give me a clue as to where you're going with this. Because yeah,
Well,
well, one, I am open to. So I've already conquered a lot of my demons, and so I am open to conversation
yeah.
regarding a lot of what's happened to me personally.
Well, I know specifically that you had you're on a mission to eradicate the impact of suicide. And I know you had some challenges where, life wasn't all that great. And it was like, why am I here? What am I doing? What am I here for? And you literally turned that around. You got six things coming up now. It's like you didn't just turn it around, you massively turned it around. Like you said, you faced the demons and said, you know what, we're not going to play the victim anymore. So on that side, and then the Appalachian Trail, you've got all of this stuff. It's like you are like the quintessential survivor. You're like, yeah, I'm not going to let life define me. I am going to take the bull by the horns, and I'm going to take control of this thing.
And well, one, yes. So I'll agree with you on all of that. But it was because I took that first step, which was reaching out to somebody, a perfect stranger, on LinkedIn and say, will you have a conversation with me? And so even though I started the journey in that way, I didn't know what that journey was really going to become. And so to give your audience some context here, when I said COVID impacted everybody, including me, I had lost my job and I was unemployed for 12 months, basically. And in that time frame, I did lose my sense of who I was, my value, my purpose, and I didn't want to live anymore. And so I made my second suicide attempt in 12 years. Well, at that point, 11 years. Um, so yeah, I had faced those demons, but what I started doing was having those conversations, and I was growing, learning, and healing vicariously because other people had gone through their own stuff. I'm going to keep this G rated. Had gone through their own stuff and found a way to overcome it. And so through all those conversations, I was learning how to overcome my own fears, my own struggles, my own circumstances, my own demons. And it really wasn't until I had my heart attack in 2022 that I made very clear and intentional, even more changes, not just about having the conversations and overcoming the suicide ideation, but to change my entire life and to create a space where I could be motivational, maybe. I could be a guiding light for some. I want to hike the Appalachian Trail. I want to put everything together and do this 2,200-mile hike. I've got a colleague who's going to do it with me. Even though our focus is to help at-risk veterans, U.S. service member veterans, because I'm a U.S. Marine. He's a U.S. Army veteran, retired. There's a lot of need for the veteran community specifically who face suicide ideation and PTSD to find meaning and value in their own lives. But really, the bigger picture is if I could change my life and I could show you how to do it, surely you can make changes in your own life too. And let me be helpful for you in that regard.
Yeah, again, so that is such a powerful background story, and it helps other people who are going through it now totally relate and say, like you reached out to someone for help, and it's like now you're the person that people can say, Keith, here's where I am. Can you help me? And because you've been through it, been there, done that, got past it, and got past it, with gusto. I mean, you went, big time, not just, not just, well, I have a better life now. It's like you've got 3 podcasts, soon to be 6 or whatever you're doing there, and you're going to
Well,
walk the Appalachian Trail. Wow.
well, let's put that in context too. So I do have conversations, another playlist. So my fourth podcast or my fourth conversation series is really focused on people who have been impacted by suicide. And so whether it's your mom, dad, brother, sister, grandfather, whomever, I ask people who are comfortable sharing their stories to share them with me, and that's a playlist. And the next conversation series is called Conversations, and those are people with. I'm having conversations with people who really just want to strip the title and everything that we are professionally, and let's get to know each other, one on one. And so those people who want to share their person with me, I have those conversations. And so, and I said the sixth conversation is really going to be focused on how Jody and I are going to help the veteran community, those who struggle with suicide ideation. What is meditation? How to be mindful of things, how to eat healthy, how to overcome suicide ideation. In addition to psychiatric treatment, what do you need to do to build your own community? So, um, these six different conversations are very specific in their focus. And so, whether it's your personal story, professional story, social impact, suicide, getting to know one another, or how to help, they all have purpose.
Yeah, and I mean, every single one of those purposes is something that's needed. And again, you lived a life where you can relate, and so you can have these conversations authentically. When you were talking about the conversation about, I think it was the second one in there for the new ones coming up, with the just, you're just having a raw, authentic conversation. So many people, I think today, don't even really know who they really are. We wear so many masks. We show up in order to, present ourselves in front of that other person the way we think they want to see us, instead of who we really are. And when you have those authentic conversations, you can really bring out the real person. I always tell people, it's like, this is what you see is what you get here. It's like, I show up the way I show up, and it's like you said, we'll keep it G-rated here. It's like that's one of my things. I got to make sure that's one of my authentic things. Is like, I got to make sure I'm checking my language, because I would have said the S word. Um, but it's being authentic, being you, and showing up as you, because that's what the world needs today. Is that we need more authenticity.
Yeah, agreed. But it's really not until you do your own gut check, and you've shared your story, on my show, and I've just shared some of my story on your show. Maybe you got to go through some stuff, and I'll keep it G-rated. You've got to go through some stuff to really identify with who you are. You're going to do that. You're going to have that gut check. It's intestinal fortitude, or it's becoming brave or courageous, whatever, mindful thought process it has to be. You find out who you are. And when you do, you find that that's okay. Who I am is okay. And when it becomes okay for you, it's okay for everybody else. And until you reach that point, you use the A word, authenticity. Until you come to that point where you're okay with yourself, you're not going to be okay with everybody else. They're only going to see what you show them. And you may hurt, you may struggle with things, you may have things that you want to talk about, things that make you cry or sad or angry. And not having somebody to have that conversation with is the most lonely experience that you're going to have. And you'll continue to have it throughout life until you become okay with yourself.
Yeah, and it's so true that some of these backstories, I mean, because we can't change the past, right? So some of these backstories that we have can literally be debilitating. So, I mean, they can send you down a really bad path, or even if you're a business owner and you're out there, you're doing stuff, you know, and you're wondering, how come I just keep hitting this glass ceiling all the time? And it could be something that's just you haven't let go, you haven't acknowledged in your life. So it's like, well, that was a bad thing and I don't even want to think about it. It was like, once you acknowledge it and let it go and release it, now it becomes your backstory. It's like, look, I got through this. Every single one of us has something that has happened that's not so good. Whether it's somebody passed, whether it's something that happened to us personally, it's we all have loss of a job, loss of a pet. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can set us off, right? And just being able to come to terms with it to move forward is huge. And I love how you have these authentic conversations and help people do that. So let me transition just a little bit here and
Okay.
say, so I understand that you also help people who say, well, you know what? I'd love to be on your podcast, Dr. Keith, but you know what? I'm really scared of the camera and I'm not really much of a podcast guest and I really don't know what to do with this. I understand that you can help people with that.
I can in a couple different ways. And so to be on my podcast, all you really need to do is have a conversation with me. And if I can't get that story out of you, maybe you don't have a story, or maybe you just don't know how to, you know, tell it correctly. But on a broader scale, and so I'm going to give a shout out to Noemi Barris. Noemi and I are starting a masterclass for people who want to really be better at what you're exactly talking about. How do I become engaging on, in this webcam? How do I really create that narrative that makes the impact, or, creates my brand or helps people understand who I am? Um, our masterclass begins the first Thursday of June 6th. And so Noemi lives in, and she'll hate me if I get this wrong. She lives all the way in Cyprus, and so I live here in Virginia in the United States. So it's intercontinental, it's global. We will reach out to anybody. And so for those who really want to improve their ability to kind of step in front of the microphone, don some headsets and say, breathe, show up, and let's have a conversation, but let's have it the right way. We're going to help you out.
I love that. And what is I know you have a website, you have a landing page for that. What is that landing page?
So it's off of my Envision Speakers Series. So if you go to envisionspeakers.com and scroll down just a bit, it's really at the top. You'll see Noemi's image, my picture, and then the button at the bottom says, sign up for the masterclass. And so envisionspeakers.com, it's probably /masterclass. But if you go there directly, you may not get to the page. So it's easier just to go to the Envision Speakers site and then click on the button to sign up.
I love that because like you said, it's, coming on some of these podcasts, like Coffee with Regina, we always say, come and join us for a cup and a chat with purpose. It's just a casual chat. Now, a lot of your podcasts that's what they are. They're casual chats. I was on one of yours and it was a casual conversation. And so for people who are thinking about, well, I'd really like to be on some podcasts because I really have a story I want to tell, or, I really have something that I want to get out there and get in front of more people. Our kinds of podcasts are great for those people who are going, I don't know what to do. It's like, what am I supposed to do? I hear this thing. I'm supposed to have this one sheet thing. I'm supposed to have this. I'm supposed to have that. And you kind of, inherently as humans, we kind of have this ability to freak ourselves out for no apparent reason.
We do. And that's because of all the hats and the masks that we wear. We want to show up being presenting our best self. And some people who don't have the experience on either side of the microphone, come in unaware, unsure, and really unprepared. And so there are some of the technical elements of, being a guest. having the right equipment, the correct webcam, microphone, even what to wear, may be an issue. Now, I've run all of my podcasts in a t-shirt. And I'm on your podcast in a t-shirt. This is part of my brand, right? This is who I am. So I'm coming in authentically. Today I'm a bit not shaven, and so I do apologize for that. But there's all the other aspects of preparation that really make or break the conversation, because it's not just about the host asking a series of questions. And there are some hosts out there that quite literally, if either will have that list on their side and say, I'm going to ask A, B, C, and D, one, two, three, and four, and that's their show. That's exactly their format, and that's quite all right. You go in prepared, scripted, as if you're giving a TED talk, and so you've got your answers. But your show, my show, and more that I'm seeing, the podcast format, their hosts are trying to go in somewhat prepared. Well, prepared, of course, mentally, physically, spiritually, but really want to engage with people in a real conversation, just like you're doing now. And that is more difficult than people actually realize. It's easy for those who are hosting the show because it's your comfort space. This is, Regina, this is your comfort space. This is your show. You've had the experience. You're coming in with an expectation of what you want to achieve. But somebody who doesn't have that experience on the opposite side of the camera may really not know how to answer one of your questions. And it may be a simple question as, how are you today? And so they're going through their brain figuring out what's the best answer to that question, rather than just breathing and relaxing and kind of being in the moment, being mindful and meditative in the moment to say, I'm doing pretty good today. And let me tell you why. When you could step into that changes the entire conversation, and it really brings the host and the guest together, and the energy that it's established there is just outstanding.
Right. So I'm hearing a couple really great tips in there. Show up as you, just be present, and don't worry about the outcome. It is what it is. It's just, answer the questions, do the stuff. When I asked you about the story, you're like, well, wait, what story? When a host, I actually have been on some podcasts where somebody asked me a question. I was like, I'm not actually sure how to answer that one. And that's a perfectly good answer.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you don't have to sit there and make something up or do something. If I don't know, or if somebody asks me something, like when I asked you about your story, you're like, well, which one? It was like, I got a bunch of them. It was like, which one do you want to hear? It's it's all fair game, and you just need to be comfortable. Just show up, be there. Trust me, anybody who's listening to this who's never been on a podcast and says, I'd really like to get on a podcast, I'd really like to share my story, check out Dr. Keith here, because I'm sure you'll fit in somewhere on one of his podcasts. Check out his page, theinvisionspeakers.com, because I am sure there is someplace in there that you'll fit in. And he also has a course that you could take. This you call it masterclass, a webinar? What do you call it?
It's going to be a masterclass. So there's six classes that will rotate every 2 months, and we'll talk about everything from creating your narrative to how to make the most of the experience after the actual recording. And so everything that goes into it. And just to give your audience, I think you've had Noemi on one of your previous conversations. And so for those who did not hear that conversation, she is a podcast agent. And so she puts people onto podcasts that align with their message.
Wow. Yeah. And she's actually amazing. So yeah, she was on Coffee with Regina a little while back, and we are out of time. And I just want to point out that, this has been amazing because not only did we get to hear a little bit about what's going on with you, we got to hear about, your story. We talked about how your story can be such a great impact when you talk about that narrative on the podcast. What is that narrative? What is your story? And the key takeaways I hear, and add in any extras if I miss any. Be authentic, be you, just show up. You know what? We're both in t-shirts right now. This is how I show up too, because this is the way I am. If I showed up in a suit one day, people would freak out going, what's the matter with her? My hair down in a suit, something like that. It's like, yeah, it might look nice, look professional, stuff like that. It's not me though. And so you're getting a fake version. So show up as you and relax, just be present. Tell your story. It's all good. Any final words?
Just breathe. Absolutely. You got to breathe, relax. But with all of that, do come prepared. You should have, if the host doesn't reach out to you specifically and say, let's have a chat, or what are some areas that you really want to talk about. If that's not happening, I will make the suggestion or the recommendation is to go back either to watch or listen to the host's previous recordings. What's that space that the host is in, and then figure out where you fit into all that to make sure that there's the alignment. If that doesn't happen, if you don't do that, reach out to the host or the host's VA specifically and say, these are some of the areas that are important to me. Do they fit into your format? And so start creating that alignment beforehand before jumping into the conversation.
That is amazing advice. That is awesome. So, for all of you watching live or on the replay, thank you for joining us for Coffee with Regina, and check out the envisionspeakers.com, because you don't want to miss this course this masterclass that Keith and Noemi have going on, because it is going to be amazing. I know both of them, and I know they're amazing at what they do. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Regina, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right. And we will see you all next time on Coffee with Regina. Bye for now.